Hello, welcome to my next video. If you're interested in looking at shot charts yourself, I'm going to show you how to do so in this one. It'll probably be pretty long, so I'll make some timestamps so that you can watch the parts you're most interested in. And before I start, in future videos I do about shot charts, let me know, would you rather me do player comparisons where I go into 2 or 3 players and see how their shot charts match up against each other over multiple seasons? Or would you rather me do team breakdowns where I'll go into maybe the 5 most used players on each team and break down their shot charts and then try to gain some insight into the team's strengths and weaknesses on offense? Let me know in the comments. So first, you need to have R and RStudio installed on your computer. Make sure to install R before you install RStudio. I'm not going to go over how to install both these in this video, but I'll put a link in the description that tells you how to install them. It's very easy and shouldn't take any more than 5 or 10 minutes. So I have RStudio opened, and you can see here that we don't need many lines of code to access the shot chart tool. There's only 4 of them. And this code is from toddwschneider's website, and I pasted it into RStudio. I'll put the code in the description along with the article he wrote about his shot charts and his code. Just to quickly go over what the code here is doing, in the first line we're telling R, let me highlight this first line. We're telling R to combine a group of packages into one name, the name here being packages. And for those new to R, what a package is a collection of functions and data sets that other people have developed so that everyone could use them. The reason for the first line of code is that it makes the next line simpler. The second line tells R to install the packages that are listed in the first line. So if we hadn't run this first line that combined all the packages into one name, the name being packages, we would have to run the install packages multiple times so that we install each one separately. But since we didn't do that, it's just one line. And even though we just downloaded the packages in the second line, we need to load the packages now so that we could actually use them. And that's what the third line does. So when we run library, it's going to load the package shiny. You could, put any of the packages name here if you wanted, but if you want to open the shot chart tool, you need to run shiny here just because that's what was used to build the tool. And the final line allows us to access toddwschneider's tool. So we use the runGitHub because his code is on GitHub, and then we run this, and then it allows us to run the code on our computer and get access to the tool. So if you want to access this tool in the future, all you have to do is run the final 2 lines of code, because you only need to install the packages once, and once you do that, it's saved onto your computer, and then now you just need to run library and then run GitHub. And one final thing before I run the code and open the shot chart tool. When running this code, you could either write it as an R script or you can write it in the R console itself. So what I have here is the code written as an R script, and the difference is that when you write it as an R script, you could save the code as an R script file, and the file will always be there when you want to have it. So in my case, I have it saved as shotcharting.r. And if you write in the R console in the bottom left here, it will not save it to the computer. So you'll need to copy and paste the code each time you want to access the shot chart tool. So I'm going to run the code now. And then when you run the code in the R script window, it actually just goes to the R console anyway. And then this is going to open the tool. Now let's look through the tool. When it first opens up, the default is Steph Curry, and it shows the current season and the shot chart format I discussed in my intro to shot charts video. The hexagonal chart that has the hexagons, and then for the colors, it shows the field goal percentage for the player and compares it to the league average field goal percentage. I'm going to go to Damian Lillard. And the reason I'm going to him is just because his shot chart's one of my favorites. He's like now become one of the players who shoots the most like very deep 3-pointers, to the point where he's like essentially like breaking the graph in a way. Like it kind of cuts off where the hexagons are on the back there. So I find that pretty crazy. But if you want, you could go as far back as the 1996-1997 season. So just to show you that, you're going to go to Michael Jordan, and you could go to 1996-1997, his season with the Bulls. And just to bring it back to what I was saying in the last video about players being efficient enough in the mid-range to like make it work in their game. So if you go to Michael Jordan, if you ignore corner threes, because it seems like, anecdotally at least, for corner threes, that's every player's like highest points per shot, unless they're like god awful from there. But aside from those, his highest points per shot area was the mid-range, and like his whole game was centered around the mid-range. He's like the king of the mid-range, and that's what made him so elite and one of the best ever. So this is just an example of how a player could still be shooting what may be considered an inefficient shot, how they could still be so great. So let me go back to Damian Lillard now. And also to like reiterate the point about the mid-range. So while Damian Lillard is better than the league average in terms of points per shot on the mid-range, like compared to his other areas on the court he could shoot from, he's better off shooting 3-pointers, at the top of the arc, which he loves to do. As you can see, that's his most attempted shot at 548 attempts. So that was a bit of a sidetrack. But so let's get back to the tool. So on the settings here, they're all on the right, and this is how you adjust the chart. So I adjusted the name, I adjusted the season. You could do regular season or playoffs. It's looking like there's going to be no playoffs this season anyway, so, but, if you click playoffs, that's why you get all nulls here. But if you go to regular season, since there's data here, it fills up. And then you could also change the theme of the tool. So light or dark. Dark just gives it this black background. I personally prefer the light, just because if you see like some of these darker purples are kind of hard to see on the black background, while they pop more on the like the cream background, I guess you could say this is. So my favorite is this hexagonal chart. That's the default, and I'll go over some changes you can make to it. The efficiency metric you want to use determines the colors, and the default is the same as the one from the last video, so it's the field goal percentage versus the league average field goal percentage for that area on the court. So you could change the efficiency metric, or the colors of the hexagons, whatever you want to call it, through this hexagon colors drop down. So here I just have it plain old field goal percentage with no comparison, but I don't particularly like this, just because I feel that numbers with nothing to compare them to don't tell you too much. And from looking at this chart, you would maybe conclude that Damian Lillard isn't a great 3-point shooter, given that it's like the bluish purple hexagons. but that's not the case because you know, he shoots at such a high volume at the beyond the 3-point line, yet is still above league average for the most part. It's a little unclear right around here if he's league average exactly, just above, just below. But in other areas, it's clear he's above the league average with the green, yellowish green. Or you could change the hexagon colors to points per shot. So here, it didn't change too much, the colors at least. And in my last video, I went over how points per shot is just the field goal percentage multiplied by the number of points that could be scored from that particular shot. And from this chart, you can see on the top left, or Damian Lillard's right behind the 3-point line, it's his most efficient shot using points per shot as your measurement. And you could also see that a lot of his shots in the mid-range are inefficient when you use points per shot, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago. And I still like field goal percentage versus the league average the best, just because the points per shot could be a bit abstract. So I'm going to go back to that. So further down along the tool, or the adjustment tools, so the hexagon size, you can make the hexagons as large or as small as you want, but I'm not too sure how this is useful. So you can make like 3.5 and they're massive. You can make them 0.5 and they're tiny. I don't see, I think the 1.5 just looks a bit nicer and not like ridiculous. So I'm going to leave it at the default setting. However, this next one, the min hexagon size, is pretty helpful. So when you're on the default setting, it shows most of the hexagons as a pretty similar size. However, this isn't particularly useful because when looking at the summary stats table, let me scroll down here. It tells us that Dame has shot only 23 corner threes this entire season out of his 1,160 shots. And the hexagons on the corners are approximately the same size as the ones at the top of the 3-point arc, which is kind of misleading because it makes it seem as though he shoots a similar amount of shots from the corners as he does at the top of the arc, which from the summary stats we could see is clearly not the case. So by using this min hexagon size adjustment, if we bring it down to like, I don't know, 0.15, we can now a bit more clearly see that most of his shots come from the top of the arc where there's the bigger hexagons and underneath the basket. And the ones in the corners are much smaller now, so it makes it a bit more clear that he doesn't shoot there very often. You could also put, I'm just going to make this a tiny bit bigger. You could also put some filters on certain shot zones. So like the shot zones being like above the break, which is like the same as top of the arc, restricted area, underneath the basket, mid-range, in between those two, etc. So just to show you, if I do above the break, it's going to show you all the 3-point line, or 3-point shots that come before this little break in the arc that would make it classified as a corner 3. Then you could take that off, get them all back. You could also do shot angle, so if you do center, it's only going to show you the shots that were shot like in the center of the court, like relative to the basket. And then I could take that off. And then I could also do shot distances. I'm not too, it feels a bit repetitive as like a filter, just because it tells you pretty much the same info as shot zones. So like if I do like 24 plus feet, it's only going to be 3-pointers If I add 16 to 24, get rid of the 24, shows you only the mid-range, etc. So I'll get rid of that. And all of these shot zone, shot distance, shot angle filters could be applied to all three types of shot charts. So now we'll go into scatter charts. These show us the location of every shot the player has taken and whether or not the shot went in. I personally don't think these are all that helpful for looking at how a player performed over the course of a season, because the hexagonal charts tell us similar information while also incorporating efficiency. But when looking at one individual game, I think they're pretty cool. So I'm going to go to January 20th when Damian Lillard put up 61 points against the Golden State Warriors. So here I'm using the date range. I'm also going to increase the dot size. Let's see. Alright, and then if you're curious, the opacity is kind of just the same as like how see-through the dots are. It's like when you lower it, they're a bit more clear, but if you make them darker, or if you increase the number, you make them darker. So about half of his points came from beyond the three-point arc, which we can expect given how much he loves to shoot the three-point ball. So of his 61, he made 10 three-pointers, so 30 points from there. And he also shot a crazy 52.6% from three that night. So, well, like over half of his shots he took from out there went in, and that's almost 20% better, give or take a few percent, than the league average. However, the shot chart, along with all the other charts that we've been going through, they don't tell us anything about free throws. So that night, Damian Lillard made all 19 of his free throw attempts, so that contributed quite a bit to 61 total points. And the last shot chart I'm going to go through is the heat map. So these tell you the distribution of shot attempts on the floor. I like these because it can filter out some of the noise in the data that the hexagonal charts do not, and give us a clear sense of where the players most often shoot. These may sound similar to scatter charts, but the difference here is that the heat maps focus on how densely clustered the shot attempts are, and because of this focus on density, almost all of the heat maps will show a player's most frequent shot type as those shot beneath the basket. So to make this more clear, I'm going to go to James Harden. And the reason I'm going to him is because he's the league leader in three-point attempts for the 2019-2020 season. I gotta adjust the dates again. Alright, so these are all the shots for the current season. So 55% of his over 1,300 shot attempts this season have been three-pointers, but if you go to the heat map, it doesn't really seem that way at all. It seems like nearly all of his shot attempts are coming from beneath the basket, and like a few are coming from beyond the three-point line. And the reason for this is because that if you open up the scatter chart, it's clear that the most densely packed area of the court he shoots from is from right underneath the basket, just simply because it's like a smaller area and a lot of shots are coming from there, as opposed to like the entirety of the area behind the three-point arc. So more shots can be taken there, but since there's a larger area, it won't look as dense as they. So that's why this is like a brighter heat spot, if you want to call it that. So to fix this, we're going to go to the shot zones that you were talking about before, and we're just going to use all the areas except for the restricted area. the restricted areas, like same word for right underneath the basket. And from here, it's a lot more clear that he loves to shoot 3-pointers, particularly to his right or the left in this chart, because that little spot there is the brightest. So that's all for this video. If you made it this far, thank you. I know it was pretty long. If you can write in the comments, tell me if you're more interested in more technical videos like this one, or would you rather me just go over the results of any analysis I do. In the future, I'm thinking of trying to show you guys how to build different types of model in R and apply them to fantasy sports and possibly sports betting. And yeah, that's all. So thank you again.